All right, we are starting now. Hello, WSU community, and welcome to the very first Information Technology Services Informational Series. My name is Nathan Timms. I serve as the ITS Crimson Service Desk Manager, and on behalf of the ITS team presenting today, we welcome all WSU faculty, staff, and of course, our wonderful students participating in today's session. We have a few intro items to cover before we begin. The first item is this presentation info session will be recorded and posted on the ITS website. We will include a handout as a ready reference for the items covered today. There will be a survey sent out to participants at the end of the info session asking for your feedback. We do ask that you hold your questions until the end of the presentation. And lastly, please make sure to join us on the next info session on July 12th at 10 a.m. All right, so as this is in our first session of the info series, we are privileged to have with us Keela Ruppenthall as our presenter. And the topic Keela will present on is data security and user responsibility. Okay. Let's see. So a little bit about Keela. Keela has worked with WSU for 9 years with the IT security programs. She has worked for the Department of Defense with the Field Security Operations Group for 15 years. This unit provides security operations oversight, security posture, and support for the Defense Information Systems Agency, which is a U.S. combat support agency. At the DoD, Keela assisted by providing tools and policies to armed forces, including security audits to ensure compliance. One of the cool things that I really liked about what Keela shared about her background was, while working for the DoD, Keela had the opportunity to work and utilize with cutting edge technologies, which gave a lot of opportunities to observe firsthand the critical need for data security within very challenging environments. Keela is not a native to the Palouse region. She and her family moved from the DC metro area, and she absolutely loves the Pacific Northwest. Without further ado, I will now turn the time over to Keela.
Good morning. Thank you for attending. My name is Keela Ruppenthall, and I work for ITS Information Security Services. Let me flip the slide. I've been working with WSU for 9 years now, and IT security is a very general way to talk about a lot of topics. And at WSU, the security team has two functional areas. We have a security operations group, which manages the program tools, and they provide the defense and monitoring for our network. And the GRC team, which stands for governance, risk, and compliance. I work for the GRC team. So people always ask what I do for a living, and I have a really hard time explaining it. So let me try to explain some of it here. The governance, we focus on the policies, practices, and strategies that help WSU align our resources and cybersecurity measures toward protecting our information. Risk management is the process of identifying, assessing, and treating IT-related risk. And finally, compliance helps make sure WSU is in line with our security standards and regulations. I had a lot of topics to choose from, so when I was asked to do this presentation, I had a hard time pinning down a concise message, but we all play a part in keeping WSU assets and information secure, so I decided the most helpful thing I can do is to point you to the resources and information that you need so you can have the tools to succeed in that role. All right, where to find guidance? The foundation of university guidance comes from our WSU policies. Depending on your role at WSU, some people visit these pages a lot, and some people only have an awareness of their existence. The WSU business policies and procedures manuals provide policy level guidance for the university. They're mostly used by university employees and administrators to help conduct their day-to-day business functions. The BPPMs are arranged according to subject matter, and today I'll be pointing out a few of the IT-related highlights. We also have executive policy manuals that contain the university system level policies. These policies are usually created by the recommendation of a policy advisory committee, and they cover a broad range of topics, but many of them apply to the whole WSU system, including the student population. So let's talk about the BPPM policies first. So BPPMs are arranged into chapters, and they range from chapter 10 to chapter 95. There are 3 chapters that relate specifically to information. We have our chapter 87 series policies, and they are the information security policies. They're managed by the ISS team, and if you support IT operations in any way at WSU, please become familiar with this catalog of policies. You'll find a lot of operational IT guidance. The ISS team manages this catalog under the guidance of our Chief Information Security Officer, and that's Michael Walters. We're currently working aggressively to mature our cybersecurity program, so this catalog is growing. I recommend checking back often. The Chapter 88 series policies are more specific to information privacy, and privacy relates more to how data is used, not how it's secured. This catalog of policies is not managed by the information security team, but it does support policies that surround healthcare related data. And WSU has really increased their focus on the area of data privacy. So this catalog is also expected to grow. And I talked to our information privacy office yesterday, and they said that they expect that there will be policies to cover other data privacy regulations that exist. But information privacy is not the focus of this discussion, but I mention it because information security practices enable our information privacy. And then finally, we have our Chapter 90 series, which covers data retention. And this is also a catalog that is not managed by the information security team, but this is where you'll find information about your data retention requirements for the information and records that you use. And I recommend scanning through it to see if there's any data that you use is listed, because that is another important responsibility at WSU. So there are a lot of executive policy manuals, but there are 3 that are most useful for the users that relate to IT security. And I wanted to point them out here. EP4 is our electronic communication policy. This policy governs the use of IT resources at WSU. Some example resources are like our network and our email. It includes information about appropriate and prohibited use of these resources. There are guidelines for email and web communications. There's a big section about the privacy of electronic communications. It includes a requirement to maintain appropriate access restrictions on your files and your passwords. And it also addresses the use of social media. EP8 is our system data policies, and I think the ISS team points this policy as a reference more than any others. When you have data, you need to know how to handle it, and this is the policy where you need to start. EP8 covers 4 key areas: data administration section. This is where you find the details about your responsibilities as a data user, and there are only two. Follow the WSU policies, standards, procedures, and guidelines, and report suspected or actual security incidents. The data administration section is the reason why we share this policy so often. It contains information about who is authorized to access what types of data. This section also includes the data classification definitions. And at WSU, the information owner is responsible for classifying the data, but it's the user's responsibility to understand the classification of the data they're handling. So if you don't know, you need to ask. Data usage covers how institutional data can be used and the requirements surrounding the release of our data. The maintenance section addresses upkeep, and it says that data security must be maintained throughout the entire life cycle of the data. And the data security section requires that business units keep an up-to-date inventory of all their confidential and regulated information. And this is also the section that requires that information to be encrypted. And then finally, EP 37, I've included this one because of its title. It's really a foundational policy that it's really high-level security policy, but they call it the information security policy. The most important thing in this policy is that this is the one that requires us to take our annual cybersecurity awareness training. All right, our roles and definitions. We're going to go back to a BPPM highlight. 8701 is another favorite policy by the ISS team. So this policy lists all the roles that are involved in supporting our program, and we all play a part. And so this policy helps us understand what parts we play. And it also includes a glossary of terms, and that really helps cut down on some of the ambiguity in our policy statements, and it helps us stay consistent in our messaging and what those policies actually mean. Data classification, EP8. I know I referenced this policy earlier, but it is so important. It gets its own slide. Not all information needs to be protected, and some information comes with dire consequences if it is not protected. So WSU has 4 data security classifications: public, non-public, WSU confidential, and regulated. Our information owners, which are our deans and VPs of our colleges, they are responsible for classifying the data. If you don't know, please ask. Another very important thing to know from this policy is the concept of least privilege. Least privilege means that you will provide the minimum level of information and access to accomplish a task. As an example, if someone asks you for a report, ask them what data fields they need. Every copy we make is another copy that has to be managed. And there are instances at WSU where we de-identify the data, and it drastically changes the classification and handling requirements, and it makes it easier for everybody. So what types of regulated data does WSU commonly come in contact with? So I thought it would be helpful to provide that information here. Student data. We have a lot of FERPA data. This is our student records information. And if you access FERPA data, it has special handling requirements and very strict sharing restrictions. So be mindful of that. Credit card data is covered by the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard. The university gets an annual third-party review, which is an audit of our PCI data handling practices. There's a lot of groups at WSU that come in contact with PCI data. Electronic personal healthcare information. We have pockets of healthcare related data that's governed by HIPAA. This area is growing, and WSU ITS in particular is working to build out the ability to provide more support for this data type. And last, but definitely not least, GLBA data. And this is financial data that is regulated by the Federal Trade Commission. We have a lot of that kind of data too, especially on our students and families. And I'm intentionally not mentioning research data because from a security standpoint, the source of the data is not as important as the type of data. And this is not a comprehensive list. We have pockets of other regulated data at the university. So we definitely need to be mindful as users of what kind of data we have. Cloud services, they're everywhere. We use them, our vendors use them, even our vendors' vendors are using them. And so for a user administrator, the cloud is easy and it's really not expensive. But for the security team and the risk owner, cloud services involve a lot of trust. There's a famous cliche, there is no cloud, it's just someone else's computer, and it explains it perfectly. Moving data to the cloud does not move the data security responsibility, and information owners are ultimately responsible no matter where the data exists. WSU provides enterprise-level cloud services that have already been vetted and reviewed for use. Not all services are approved to store and process all data types, and I'm providing a link to the WSU Cloud Acceptable Use Matrix that gives guidance about these already vetted services. We recommend that you try to use our system level services when possible, but we understand that it's not always possible. So if a service provider is not listed on the matrix and your use case involves confidential or regulated data, you will need an IT security review for that service. And remember, even a small purchase, like with a P card, can have access to highly sensitive information. So it all goes back to knowing what kind of data you're dealing with. Okay, earlier in this presentation, I mentioned you had two responsibilities as a user: following our policies and guidance and reporting our suspected and actual security incidents. So security incidents could involve unauthorized access or disclosure of information. They could be related to the misuse of information or even something that seems suspicious. WSU has one of the best security operations centers in EDU, and I'm not exaggerating. We have an incredible security operations center, and they really want you to contact them. BPPM 8755 is our policy that covers incident response, and it contains reporting requirements that I've listed here. So suspected incidents should be reported as soon as reasonably possible. We are required to use a secure means to report it, either by telephone or email. And if you use email, it needs to come from your Office 365 account. And the policy specifically says, do not use services like Gmail. Incidents that involve confidential and regulated data need to be reported immediately after discovery. And there are 3 people that need to be included in that notification: our CISO, our chief compliance and risk officer, and your applicable delegated authority, which is your information owner or the delegated information owner. There are also federal and state laws that might have special requirements for incident reporting. So the most important takeaway is to understand the data that you use. And I wanted to point out that potential disclosure of data is included in that reporting requirement. And finally, our Crimson Service Desk, they are our #1 resource for IT support. So if you ever have a question or in doubt, please contact them. And in the materials, I've included a 1-page quick reference guide that contains some of the more important policy links from the presentation, and that'll be available for download. And now I can open it up to questions and quit sharing.
Thank you so much, Keela, for the presentation. And as you say, it is now our opportunity to take questions from the audience and to explore the topic a bit more. To let everyone know, the data handling and security handout is now in our chat, so your download. So to get the Q&A started, I've got a question for you, Keela. How has the landscape of data security changed in the last 5 years? What have you seen?
So I've noticed an increased awareness about the risk associated with IT by business leaders. And not just WSU, the entire industry has started to recognize that it's only a matter of time before a security incident happens. And so business leaders have learned to manage it with risk because they're already familiar with risk management processes. They use that to manage financial risk. And the conversation, it's really been helpful because it changes that conversation to something that they know. And as the security team stops saying no, and we start becoming enablers of technology and part of that conversation.
Yeah. Thank you. I heard a cliche saying once that I thought was funny, is there's only 2 types of organizations in the world. The first that has already been hacked, and the second that has yet to be hacked, but will be soon. It's a little bit scary to say it that way or think in those terms, but yeah, that has definitely been an evolving beast.
Yeah, it's not a matter of if, it's when.
When, absolutely. Okay. Another question that I've written down is, how should the businesses and specifically WSU, our university, balance the need for data accessibility with data security?
So in security, we say that we always reference the CIA triad, where it's confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And that's what we're supposed to protect for the data. But the real triad is affordable, usable, and secure. Pick 2, right?
Right.
But it's really an exaggeration because you need to be somewhere on that heat map, right? You need to balance those 3 things. And the only way to do that is with risk management. So we're really leaning on managing the risk, because you're not going to get rid of all your vulnerabilities. You're not going to provide ultimate security. I mean, if you chose secure and affordable, it would be unplugged, right?
Mhm.
So it's risk management practices, and we really have to rely on that.
Right. And as kind of a follow-up that, and based on your experience, can you share with us maybe a little bit of the differences of what you see, how the university, WSU, approaches data security and maybe other secure organizations like the DoD, right? Kind of what is the differences of what you've seen?
Right. So the DoD is, we don't share anything unless somebody needs it. And it's very controlled, and everybody is taught from day one to manage the data in an appropriate way. And it's just part of your data normal practices. University is the opposite. I mean, the nature of a university is information sharing, collaboration, open, usability. I mean, our networks started out being built by students, right? I mean, it's grown organically. So it's a real challenge to balance that need for access and security and still be able to give people their tools to do their job.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Okay, talking about cloud-based storage, I wrote down a question here. What are some of the new challenges and opportunities that you've seen that have emerged with the increased adoption of cloud-based data storage and applications?
So cloud services have become the go-to way to deliver services because it's so cheap and easy. It's increases collaboration, it's economies of scale can be used, they're resilient because you don't have to like do your own data, you don't have to do your own disaster recovery. I mean, it's all built in, but all those opportunities are also challenges because when you make something more collaborative, you're already opening up a hole to make it do that, right? And there's a lot of trust that comes with cloud services. And from the security standpoint, it's really hard to verify that some of their security claims are what they say they're doing, because they say that they have password expirations internally, but I have no way to verify that because we don't have an army of people going out to audit these vendors. So while it makes things easier, it also makes things harder.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's you don't know where it's at, or all right, tracking it down takes a lot of time.
Well, and the security team does a review, and we look at, we have ways to communicate with the vendors to get the information. The bigger vendors, it's a lot easier because they've already had to go through this with other universities and they get reviewed. But it's the smaller service providers that are more of a challenge because, like I said, you can go spin up an AWS environment on your own and have it charged by how much you use it, and you could put whatever kind of data in it, and if we don't know about it, it's there, right?
Right, absolutely. Thank you. What are some of the top threats to data security that the university should be aware of today? What have you seen come up recently?
Well,
Being fun.
we can't not talk about OpenAI and ChatGPT, and I mean,
Right,
that's definitely the conversation of the day, right? And
right,
I know from my point of view, the real challenge for me is that user awareness is becoming more important than ever because, well, the DoD has those unlimited resources. They have ultimate control, and we're a university. We don't have the tools, we don't have the money, and we're years behind, right? So this is a new relatively new capability that's exploded on the world, and we're rushing to figure out how to address that. And it's not just the security team, it's the university as a whole, right?
right. Absolutely.
Definitely that user awareness is all we have right now for that. And that's difficult, right?
Right. Yeah. And since you brought it up with AI, what is something that the users should be aware of when using like an OpenAI ChatGPT? Is there anything that they should be cautious of when using these?
Yes. All the data that you put into that little window is being shared with a third party that you have no control over and we have no visibility into. And so that's why the university guidance is public data only. But one of the big things that we've talked about internally is, so there's WSU internal is a data classification, right? And that could be operational data. We might not want to share our code base with the world, but people are using it to make their code better. So at what point does dev code become production code? And at what point does that information become WSU internal information? That's a hard line to define. And I don't know that I have a definition for that right now.
Right. Right. Do you think our teams will will ever come up with guidance on that? Because that does seem like a really challenging line to draw in the sand. What's public versus what is just internal?
Right. So that's your information owner, right? It's the information owner that classifies that, and it's up to them to decide whether that is internal or public data. Because
Right.
it's a subjective call. So it's the information owner.
Right. So I guess the litmus test we could pose to everybody is, if you're going to type something into ChatGPT or something, is that something you want everybody to know in the world, right? Is this something for public?
And the other thing to be mindful of that I'm not even addressing are all the other risks with ChatGPT, the biased responses, the inaccurate responses. I mean, go there and ask it what the risk is, and it will tell you that I'm biased. I might give you a wrong answer, and it will tell you that it's not, it could be public information. So definitely be mindful of those things.
Right, absolutely. And we have a question from Terrence. Thank you, Terrence. Does WSU have any stance on zero knowledge end-to-end encrypted cloud services?
So I'm not sure I understand the definition of zero knowledge. Can I have clarification on that?
Yeah.
Google it real quick.
Yeah. Terrence, if you'd like to provide a little bit more clarity there. We could also unmute you if you would like to ask a question.
Where a cloud can, and that's what I assumed, but I
Okay.
didn't want to make that assumption. I wanted to make sure I understood what Terrence meant. So if it involves WSU confidential or regulated data, the security team needs to review it no matter what, because one of the examples is FERPA data. We have to keep it in the United States. So if the cloud provider is storing data outside of the United States, we need to know that. So we're asking more questions beyond, is this encrypted? We're asking, where is the data? Where does it reside? And we're looking to make sure that they meet our security requirements, which are WSUs, and any regulation or any state. We have to follow the state of Washington too. So there's other regulations around the data beyond encryption.
Okay.
And yes, encryption. I'm a big fan of encryption. Terrence, if you can encrypt the data, I would advise it, because years ago, encryption would like bog down processing power, and it was a concern, but our processing is so speedy now. I love the idea of encrypting everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And Terrence just said, it seems like we've got additional layers of protection for our data. So thank you so much, Keela. Thank you, Terrence, for your question. So just to expand on that, Keela, that means then that FERPA protected data, as an example, couldn't be stored even in friendly quote unquote states such as Australia or the UK. It's Canada, right? It's literally like here and here only.
Yeah. Yeah. And so if you have a need for that, you need if there's a need to go outside of our requirements, you have to get a documented exception. And that is acceptance from the information owner that they accept the risk associated with whatever you aren't doing.
Okay. So I know this might be a challenging question. Maybe there is no really good answer for this, but of course we have international researchers, right, where they travel with their own devices. WSU device provides them, this equipment, and they go international. Technically, they're taking FERPA protected materials with them. In the context of Terrence's question, what are some of the things that WSU needs to do or should do as kind of a best practice to secure that data, since it is leaving the United States and it is FERPA and those kind of.
It shouldn't be on their laptop leaving the United States. It should be in the cloud, and they should be accessing it with a VPN. And somewhere at on our web pages, there's guidance for international travel. I can provide that as a follow-up if in the resources, because it is valuable to know that information, and I haven't accessed it recently, so I'll need to dig it up. But there are some requirements and recommendations around that. But yeah, don't put it on a thumb drive. Keep it in our Office 365 environment if you can, and use a VPN.
Right. So really the best practice and the requirement is not to store the data on the laptop that you're using to travel internationally.
And there may be instances where that has to happen. I don't know that there's a policy requirement that says that can't happen, but you definitely need, when we say data can't be stored outside of the United States, we're saying our vendors can't have a data center or exist or keep the data outside of the United States. And the real reason why that exists is because we need to have the ability that it's for legal reasons. We might not have legal control over the data in these other countries where it's a jurisdiction thing, where here in the United States, FERPA data is a protected information type, and we have ultimate control over that jurisdiction, right? So we understand the laws, and if it goes to court, it'll be a U.S. court. Right.
That does make sense. And that's clear where maybe it's, this is the best practice, the recommended. We're going to take a laptop out. It's got FERPA protected data in the professor's My Documents or the researcher's My Documents folder locally stored. Best practices is really not to do that, right? So don't have that locally on your computer as a best practice.
Right, but if you do, make sure your computer's encrypted and the file's encrypted. Maybe even put a password on it, because if you lose your laptop and it has regulated data on it, it's a reportable incident.
Right.
Right. Oh. And then we have to do the response activities that are associated with that.
Right. Yes. It's not unheard of for a faculty member to travel to Europe. They've got their bag and it's got their laptop, and next thing they know, that bag has disappeared somewhere, somehow. And who knows where that laptop went, unfortunately. So
yeah, and if there's regulated data on it, it's a confidential data. It's a reportable. Actually, I would report that no matter what kind of data is on it, because it's a WSU system. But really, if you have WSU institutional information on your laptop and it gets stolen, please report it.
Right. We'll stop. Please report. No matter what. Wonderful. Thank you. So one of the things that you had mentioned earlier, mentioned about AI data going out and then it's on who knows where servers. For a while there, we also had something called Internet of Things, or IoT. And these were also collecting up data, right, on things that you did or said. Do you see any parallels, or is there any similarities between AI and IoT, or is there some differences that we need to be cautious of when it comes to IoT or Internet of Things and using those tools?
Well, we're eventually going to have our chat bot plug in to Alexa. So I don't know if that API or connection exists yet, but it will. As of now, Internet of Things is kind of separate from the OpenAI and AI technologies. At least I hope so. Internet of Things, they come with a lot of risks because they're usually not updatable firmware. They are connected to our network. They collect various information, voice, temperature. They run our houses. they do a lot of things and they aren't always supported by the vendors for updates, so they're prone to vulnerabilities. If I had Internet of Things devices on my home, which I don't, but I would probably create a little enclave that would be separate, like a subnet for my Internet of Things devices, to keep them separate from my regular network traffic. But they definitely pose another, every time you create an access point to ingest information, you're ingesting the ability and a vulnerability, the chance of a vulnerability.
Yeah. Can you clarify that a little bit more? You use some very big words for me to understand. You're talking about every single time you create an accessible point, you create a vulnerability. Can you use smaller words for me?
Okay, so every time you plug in a device, every time you connect to the internet, every time you install software, every time you add an API, which is, you'll frequently, if you go to like your Teams, you'll see all these API plugins that you can add. Every time you do that, you're creating another connection point, and every connection point is a potential weakness.
Got it. A potential weakness for a hacker or a malicious entity of some kind to gain that data for whatever it is. So even if it's like those thermometers or those smart, smart ovens, right? It connected to your Wi-Fi, that is a potential access point to just collect who knows what data, right? I mean,
well, or even maybe the thing that connects to your stove doesn't collect data, but it accepts instructions and they turn on your stove when you're not home. Those kind of things.
Right. Well, that would increase my gas bill significantly. I'd be very disappointed.
Or burn down your house.
Well, a little dark there. But no, that's a good point. One of our attendees brought up mobile phones and data security. Can you expand a little bit on data security and personal phones? We know that if we have a personal phone, we are asked to use it to authenticate. We now use these smart devices in some ways to even do work. We're road warriors. What do we need to be cautious of when we use our own personal equipment for data security, and specifically talking about phones?
So the only thing I use my phone for at WSU is to answer the phone, because I work remote and my office phone is forwarded to my phone, and I use it for my Okta app for authentication. If you are using your phones with email, please know that it pulls you into the potential for a records request. We frequently get records requests for various reasons. We work for a state university, so all our records are public, or most of them are. Records are public. They can subpoena your phone for information if it's involved with like litigation. There's a potential for that. Sorry, I was reading the chat.
No, it's okay.
That's interesting that there's a requirement for that, because in my opinion, if you're required to use a mobile device, then you should be issued a WSU device, because it should be controlled. We don't have mobile device management up and running at an enterprise level for the university, which is one of our big gaps. But ideally, all of our stuff would be managed. And then there's always that, do you want your personal phone managed by WSU? I don't. I'm not putting email on it, right?
Right.
And those are business decisions for the university and your department, because I see Kevin's message about being required to use their personal devices. That's a tough one for me to swallow, requiring me to use a personal device. As an employee, I would be like, look, I don't want to, because I intentionally don't want my personal email or my business email on my personal phone.
Yeah, that makes sense. So the broad idea then is that if we use our mobile devices for work-related purposes, potentially in a worst case scenario, we would have to at least share or surrender that device's information because it was used for business purposes or for WSU, for Washington State work, essentially. So to be very cautious and aware of our use. Is that what I'm hearing from you, Keela?
Yes, and Jim Morrison makes a very good point in the chat. He says that he believes that forwarding email, WSU email to my personal email makes it discoverable too, and that's true.
Okay, so again, taking that the next step, if we use like a Gmail account and we have an auto forward or something like that from WSU into our Gmail account, that Gmail account then is part of a Freedom of Information Act or any sort of litigation or any audit, any state required audit, we would have to give that access over. Is that correct, Keela?
Yes, and Terrence mentions chats and instant messages in that too. And I'd like to bring up the challenge, OpenAI, ChatGPT. There is no way that I can discover that information, so please be mindful.
Right, right, absolutely. And just to be very clear, if we are being required to use our own personal equipment for WSU related purposes, that is a further conversation with the leadership of that unit, right? As in the extent and the policies behind that requirement. Is that correct?
Daniel mentions that he thinks it's illegal, so I can't speak to the legality of it. I know that WSU doesn't necessarily prohibit it, right?
Right.
We are doing it. And as far as personal devices, I don't know if that's illegal or not. That is something that needs to be, you need to talk to your leadership about that.
Right, right. No, that makes sense. One of the things also that Kevin had brought up before too was that mobile device management, right? We have mobile device management here at WSU, or is that something that is future us to assist us with using laptops and those kinds of things?
We have it. We hadn't turned it on, but based on what Kevin is saying in the chat, we are turning it on now. We just don't have a policy supporting it. And so I would like to point out that there's a difference between, so a policy is high level guidance. It says, I have this analogy that I use. Policies say that you must walk the dog.
Mm-hmm.
You have to do this. And then we create standards that support the policies, and they give the specifics of the requirements. The dog must be walked 2 miles twice a day, right? And we're building out our policies, and as the next round is to build out the standards that support those policies. This is all in progress and part of our growth. And then finally, the third thing are processes, and processes say how you do something. I walk the dog twice a day for 1 mile to the park and back. Just the details of how you walk the dog with a leash.
Right.
Those are the details. So we're probably lacking our policy and standard for mobile device management, but it's definitely in the roadmap to get our policy catalog published within the next, hopefully, year. And
right.
Then the standards will start to be built out on those policies, and it doesn't have to be all the policies first, and we can do the standard development in conjunction with the policies.
Right. Thank you very much for that. So just talking about that high level policy, Washington State does receive a lot of policies from, Washington State University receives that from Washington State, right? And so is there a Washington State mandate or policy to all of its supporting units, all the universities and government agencies regarding mobile device management, or is there anything that you can speak on that for us?
So I would have to look at the OCIO standard, which is the Office of Compliance and something. So, but that's the Washington State entity that issues the security technology guidance that we have to follow. WSU uses the OCIO policies, but we also use NIST 800-53, which is a framework for establishing cybersecurity program.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know the specifics. I see that Kevin and I see Daniel, it's Kevin, that mentioned there's a memo requiring mobile device management. We aren't there yet. So security is a journey, not a destination. We are definitely on our journey.
Right. That makes sense. It's wonderful. And then I see that Sarah shared, or Daniel shared one of our BPPMs. Thank you very much, Daniel and Sarah, for our mobile device policy. So I know that these devices, we use them all the time, a lot of it for work. And so this will definitely keep coming up. So it's good to know that it's on a roadmap. It's things that system-wide we're going to be setting a standard, or at least that's the dream and the hope. Wonderful. All right, we are getting very close to our time. Keela, audience, is there any other last points that we would like to bring up, or additional questions and thoughts? Okay. Well, I think we've had a lot of content, so we'll wrap it up just a few minutes early then. Thank you so much, Keela, for your time. And again, we'd like to thank everyone who participated in the event today, especially our presenter, Keela. And I'd also like to acknowledge the work of our ITS communications and Zoom teams for assisting with organizing today's info session. Last three things to note before we end. Today's presentation is recorded and it will be posted on the ITS website. You will receive a survey at the end of this session, and we would love your feedback. And then join us on July 12th at 10 a.m. for the next info session. So thank you very much. And as we always say, go Cougs. Bye.